Hello and welcome again to this edition of Capitol Dateline Online. I'm your host, Brad Swanson, and we're coming to you just a few blocks from the Capitol at the headquarters of the Florida Cable Telecommunications Association. I'm once again joined by our special guest, Jim Saunders, who is the executive editor of the News Service of Florida, here to tell us what's happening in the Capitol. Jim, welcome.
Thanks.
All right, so we are in it. I mean, we're still in committee weeks, but it feels like session. Does it feel that way to you?
It definitely feels that way to me. We're going to get a little break next week, a little bit of a break before session starts, but it is going pretty fast and furious up there right now.
All right. Well, while we're going to push past it, we do need to address, obviously, the biggest issue that's cooking right now, which is the battle between the governor and the Speaker of the House on Enterprise Florida. Incentives and Visit Florida is wrapped up in there. What just happened with that? What's happening?
Well, it seems like something happens every day, basically, but the House is pushing forward with its plan to abolish Enterprise Florida and get rid of the funding for Enterprise Florida. They are ready, they keep moving forward on that, and the governor and House Speaker Richard Corcoran are in a constant, it seems, battle of words about the wisdom of that. The House put out a proposal this week that would allow spending $25 million on Visit Florida, and the governor came out strongly against that and said he needs $76 million for it, and that $25 million would have all sorts of strings attached to it. So I'm not sure it was totally a genuinely heartfelt proposal from the House, but yeah, they keep going back and forth, and it's gotten personal. I mean, it just.
How so?
Well, I mean, they keep basically, the governor's questioned whether the Speaker knows anything about business, how business works. He's questioned whether the Speaker's motives are political, and the Speaker has sort of said that anybody who is on the other side has been making hysterical arguments that business is going to go away, and so I mean they keep banging heads on this stuff. Interestingly, the Senate's kind of just sitting and watching. I mean, the Senate sort of is lined up with the governor, but they really haven't taken any steps to do much with this issue at this point. And they might kind of watch it and play out a little bit out of the House and then react to it.
Well, it looks like outside of that issue, disruption is the name of the game, and disruption in kind of some traditional regulatory environments. And specifically, I think the first one I want to cover with you is the Certificate of Need program. Give us a little perspective on what that is and what's being attempted there.
Well, a lot of this is coming out of the House. I mean, Speaker Corcoran has put forward a lot of disruptive, I guess you'd call them disruptive ideas. And a lot of it deal with regulatory issues. Certificate of Need is something that's been controversial in Florida for years and years, and it involves hospitals and nursing homes and hospice operations have to go to the State Agency for Healthcare Administration to get to get approval to be able to build new facilities. Speaker Corcoran and some of his allies have been saying for a couple years that this is antiquated, it's anti-competitive, and in the past they have proposed ideas to get rid of this regulatory process for hospitals. Well, this year they are putting forward a bill that would go beyond that. It would also get rid of the process for nursing homes and hospice facilities. And we saw this week the nursing home industry has come out very strong against this bill, against the idea of getting rid of Certificate of Need for their industry. Hospices are also opposed to it. The hospital industry is kind of split. I mean, there are a lot of the older sort of safety net hospitals. They want to keep Certificate of Need.
Nonprofit hospitals.
Nonprofit hospitals. But, for instance, the HCA hospital company, which has hospitals all over the state, for profit, it is advocated in the past, at least, for getting rid of Certificate of Need and saying that the state should get its hands off where hospitals are built. If they're viable, and the companies want to build them, they should be able to build them. So this is a big issue in the legislature. A lot of lobbying going on about this issue. Again, it's been a big issue for hospitals the past couple of years, but now the nursing homes are geared up and they're lobbying pretty heavily against this bill as well. I think in the end game, the question is what is the Senate going to do? The Senate has basically blocked these bills in the past to eliminate certificate of need. Governor Scott would love to get rid of certificate of need, but where it goes in the Senate, we're not sure at this point.
Right. Well, we'll have to stay tuned for that. So healthcare is still on the agenda in a few other areas. We have former Representative, now Congressman Matt Gaetz, coming back to the Capitol this week to talk about the block grant issue. We've covered it in the past, but where do you see that issue going as the session approaches?
Well, this is a different issue than the sort of regulatory issues that are popping up. But it would be very disruptive. It's a very disruptive idea. President Trump, during his campaign, called for using a block grant system in Medicaid. Basically, the idea generally is to give states a sum of money for their Medicaid program and then to give the states flexibility in how that program is run, which is far different than the current system, which everything kind of all the state decisions kind of have to be run by Washington. Mm-hmm. So President Trump made that a campaign promise. A lot of Governor Scott and legislative leaders would like to see that happen. And as you said, Congressman Gaetz, who was recently elected in November, is going to be in town today and going to be talking about those types of issues, supporting that sort of approach, which would shift a lot of this decision making down to the states. Opponents of this idea say that functionally, what it will lead to is less money coming into the Medicaid program, which would lead to cuts in services, certain decisions having to be made about how to squeeze the programs. And a lot of opponents of this idea are worried about that.
Well, that's not where the sacred cows that are being attacked ends, right? So we're going to move from the healthcare system over to the education system. And there's a couple of bills out there that are looking to attempt to grab construction dollars that are locally taxed and appropriated from public schools and extend that construction dollars to charter schools. What's happening with those bills? How do we see it? How are they breaking out?
Charter school construction's it's a big issue in the education world because charter school growth in Florida has been substantial in the past 2 decades, really, but the charter schools are public schools by definition, that they're run by private operators. Charter schools are looking for construction money just like traditional public schools would. And as you might expect, traditional public schools are fighting that because the pie is only so large and they don't want to lose out on it. So with that as a sort of precursor, there's a bill up in the Senate, in the Senate committee this week, 2 bills, one of which would allow or lead to that charter school local tax money construction money being split between charter schools and the traditional public schools. That started to move forward in the Senate this week. The other bill is a bit more problematic. The school districts are saying, if you want us to split this money, allow us to raise our millage rate, raise the amount of taxes we collect.
Right now there's a cap,
So
right?
the pie will get bigger to split. And that got stuck in a Senate committee this week. They'll probably readdress it. But it wouldn't necessarily involve the legislature raising taxes. But anytime these sorts of bills come up in which the legislature would authorize tax increases, they get kind of nervous about that because politically it could be presented as that the legislature is raising local taxes. Really, that isn't what happens. But they do not, there's a lot of nervousness about looking like their fingers are on tax increases. So that's going to be, I think, where a lot of this plays out. Speaker Corcoran has been a very strong supporter of charter schools and school choice. He has made no bones about it that he wants to take steps to expand charter schools and school choice more broadly. So, in the House, I think it's that type of approach definitely has a good chance. Again, a lot of these questions about regulatory issues disruptive issues. A lot of that's going to come down to what the Senate is willing to do.
Right. Okay, so the next big one that's out there that is more being disrupted by the courts is workers' comp. I mean, this is out there, this is big, you've got court decisions, you've got ramifications for the business community by and large. You just recently went to a court hearing. What's happening in workers' comp world?
Well, the Office of Insurance Regulation in this fall approved a 14.5% increase in workers' compensation rates for businesses, employers, and this has sort of set the business world into a furor in terms of trying to take steps to knock that down. But in the process of that, there was a lawsuit filed that alleged that the Sunshine Law, open meetings law, was violated in the course of the way these rates were developed. A Leon County Circuit judge ruled that indeed the Sunshine Law had been violated and that this whole 14.5% rate increase should be tossed out. Now there's a hearing at the First District Court of Appeal on on that issue of the Sunshine Law. We don't have a ruling yet, although the judges appeared very skeptical of the argument that the Sunshine Law was violated. What that would mean would be that this rate increase would continue to be in place, and it also sets the stage for a legislative debate that we keep expecting to see about changes in the workers' comp system.
Has anyone showed their cards at the legislative level on what the plan is?
Well, we haven't really seen a legislative proposal that's complete. There's discussion of things. Associated Industries of Florida had put together a task force that had worked together on this issue, and they put out a recommendation. But some of the recommendation is pretty far-reaching in terms of attorneys' fees for the lawyers who represent injured workers. And I tend to think that proposal will get a large blowback and may not, as it stands today, may have a difficult time of passing. But we have not really seen a detailed proposal from the legislature. Workers' comp is an incredibly complicated system. It involves lawyers, businesses, patients.
Say no more. Right?
Medical providers, you name it. Everybody gets in the room and everybody's going a different direction on it. So that is something that still needs to play out. The business community, though, needs some sort of legislation to pass this year. If nothing passes, rates probably will continue going up.
Right. Well, so staying on the theme of disruptive, right? So now the next one is on ride sharing. Ride sharing is a disruptive technology. It changed the way, but really disrupting the regulatory body. Usually local transportation for pay has been regulated by local commissions for taxis typically. But now it looks like there's a push to preempt the local authority and move that to the state. Where are these bills? What's happening? Who's rallying behind it?
Well, the House is moving very fast on this issue. The House has been supportive over the past couple of years of bills that would essentially say this is regulated at the state level. It's not going to be up to the local governments to regulate whether Uber, Lyft, those sorts of businesses, how they operate, how much they would have to pay a licensing fee or permitting fees, those sorts of things. So the House is moving forward with this approach that would have statewide regulation, get rid of a lot of these local potential local regulations on the ride-sharing companies. The Senate, again, has sort of balked at that approach in the past. At this point, it's a little bit unclear to me how the Senate is going to approach the issue this year. Andy Gardner, who was the former Senate president, was not a fan of this statewide regulatory approach. But he's no longer there. So they've got different leadership. It's a ton of lobbying going on both sides. You got the ride sharing side of things. You've also got the taxi cab side of things. Taxi folks are saying, you know what, we still have to play by these local regulations. Why give an advantage to the ride sharing companies? So
well, the ride sharing people are arguing that number one, it attaches to a Visit Florida brand, if you will. This is everywhere, and when you come to Florida, are we a backwater town and we don't offer this? And then there's the other arguments that for community services, that's another one that we hear being made out there. I think you're seeing the arguments stack up on both sides.
Well, and I assume the cabs can make the same arguments if they, so it is one of those issues that this is this technology has come into play in the last, 5-10 years.
Right.
So it's something that's new. A lot of people are really excited about it, but it goes into a system that has been around for decades and decades and decades. And how does the legislature address that? Again, there's a lot of effort on both sides to influence that. The outcome of it. The Senate in the past has said stuff like, well, let's just focus on making sure that there's insurance requirements for ride-sharing drivers or in the companies. They've taken a smaller scale approach than what the House is trying to do.
Right. Okay, so let's turn from these regulatory disruptive environments, the legislation that we're seeing, because while we're in committee weeks and session hasn't started, we're still in the fundraising season. Right, we see multiple meetings or multiple fundraisers every night, but a big chunk of change just came into a cabinet member's office who is rumored to potentially be readying himself for a run for governor.
Yeah, Adam Putnam, the agriculture commissioner, he is just raising money hand over fist through a political committee. He doesn't have a campaign opened for the governor's race, but there is, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 just the first couple of weeks of February came in this political committee, and he has millions of dollars on hand in that political committee. I think we've seen over the recent years these political committees have played more and more important roles in statewide races and even in legislative races. But so it appears at least, this committee is building up huge bankroll that he's going to give him an advantage going into this governor's race. We see money flowing all over the place right now. There's legislators have committees. Jack Latval, the Senate Appropriations Chairman, raising a ton of money for a committee he heads or is involved with. And Latval has talked about possibility run for governor as well. But I think these guys see that if they, for whatever is going on in the future, they need to start building up these committee funds.
War chest, right?
And then after session, I think we'll probably see a lot more announce their intentions about whether they'll run, and they'll raise money through the more regular campaign channels. But these committees, there's a lot of money flowing to them, and Putnam, he's going to have millions of dollars. In the next, if he waits until after session to announce a run, he'll have millions of dollars on hand to help kickstart that, and that gives him a big advantage.
Well, we're about to go in as this week comes to an end. Next week will be a quote-unquote off week for the legislature, and then session will begin. So we'll definitely look forward to your coverage. I'm sure fundraising will still be happening out across the state, but as for policy, we get a brief time to catch our breath and get ready for the beginning of session. Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us here at Capitol Dateline Online. For more news and views, visit us on our Facebook page or connect with us on our Twitter page or YouTube page at the FCTA on both of those handles. Thank you for joining us.